right after more lively debate with Fiona Bruce.
There's no shortage of verdicts on the Chancellor's budget yesterday. The government will be taking more from us in tax overall than at any point since 1948. But the government insists it's cutting taxes. Our audience here in Cardiff will give us their verdict. Labour's run the devolved government here for over 20 years with recent cooperation from Plaid Cymru. All the Westminster seats here are Labour too. But our audience here is a broad reflection of the electoral picture across Wales. They also want to talk about George Galloway and what does his election mean for our politics. And after the report into the murder of Sarah Everard, what can be done to root out toxic and dangerous police officers? Welcome to Question Time. Panel from the UK government, David TC Davies, who's been Secretary of State for Wales since Rishi Sunak became PM nearly 18 months ago. In a previous life, the MP for Monmouth was a special constable and keen amateur boxer. Labour's Nick Thomas-Symonds is Shadow Cabinet Office Minister and is heavily involved in organising his party for the next election, which is almost certain to be this year. He's MP for Torfaen, which is just a short drive from here. The leader of Plaid Cymru since last June is Rhun ap Iorwerth. Plaid are committed to Welsh independence and have 12 seats in the Welsh Parliament, or Senedd, where they work closely with the governing Labour group. Head of Economics and Politics at the global media giant Bloomberg is Stephanie Flanders. Before that, she was the BBC's economics editor and also chief market strategist with JP Morgan Chase & Co. And Guto Harri is a communications specialist, writer and broadcaster. He was advisor to Boris Johnson, both when he was London Mayor and then Prime Minister. Welcome to our audience here in Cardiff. Great to see you. Of course, welcome to you, as always, at home. You can follow the programme on BBC Sounds, on BBC iPlayer, and, of course, there's always a discussion going on social media as well. Let's take our first question, which is from John Worry.
Will Jeremy Hunt's budget make any real difference to the lives of British people who are struggling to make ends meet? Well, David TC Davies, is it going to make any difference?
Yes, it will. It'll make a difference, for example, to the many people who are going to benefit from the cut in national insurance. It's going to make a difference to those who will benefit from the higher threshold for child benefit. It's going to make a difference to anyone with children because in England, anyway, the Conservative government in England, they can't do this in Wales, are delivering free childcare for children over 9 months old up to 33 hours a week, which is going to enable people to get back into the workplace. So it's going to make a difference to all of those people. The fact that the budget follows...
Who's going to be worse off?
Well, non-DOMs are going to be worse off for a start if you're going to pick on a single group of people, and so will some of the big oil and gas companies. They'll pay more in taxes.
So will some people earning less, won't they? Some of the people on lower wages.
Well, anyone earning who's paying national insurance is going to be better off as a result. But by the way, I don't for 1 minute run away from the fact this has been a very difficult time for people. I mean, when COVID came along, the government in 2020 had to borrow £400 billion, find £400 billion to pay for people to be on furlough, to support companies, to support the energy support mechanisms after Russia invaded the Ukraine. It has been very, very difficult. £400 billion was spent supporting the least well-off, and at some point it has to be paid back. We can't escape that. But if you look at what's happened over the last couple of years now, we had the problem of inflation, which all Western European countries had. That's come down now to 4%, predicted to come down to 2% over the next few months. We've got growth coming back into the economy now, slightly faster than expected, not as much as we'd like, but it's there. And we're going to start to see a fall in debt as a percentage of GDP. So I'm not for 1 minute going to say everything's great. I'm just saying we had a very, very difficult couple of years. I think we can all recognise that. And the picture is definitely a lot rosier.
And just on everything not being great, just on a point of correction, when you say everyone who pays national insurance will be better off, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, only people earning between 26,000 and 60,000 will be better off. Those earning less and those earning more will be worse off.
Anyone paying national insurance will be paying less national insurance.
Yes, but they'll be paying more tax overall. That's according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, unless you disagree with them.
Well, what I would say is that if they're paying national insurance, they'll be paying less in national insurance. I mean, that has to be...
But they'll be paying more tax overall.
Well,
That's
I'll
the
have
point.
a look at the figures, yeah.
OK, well, plenty of people have, and that's the conclusion they've come to. Nick?
No, I do not believe for a moment that this budget is going to make the difference that this country requires. We've heard there about tax. Tax is at the tax burden is at its highest level for 70 years. Prices are going up in our shops. People are coming off fixed-rate mortgage deals and still paying the Tory mortgage premium. What we have actually seen is a budget that, frankly, lifted the lid on 14 years of Conservative economic failure. And David, if I may say, it was great to hear you then making the case for the non-DOMS tax changes, and great to hear you making the case for a windfall tax, because the Conservatives have been going around, first of all, on the windfall tax, they were opposing that, then they adopted it. On the non-DOMS tax changes, based on the principle that we've argued for, the people who live here should be paying their taxes here, Conservatives have been going into the TV studio saying what a dreadful idea it was for the last couple of years and what an abject humiliation it was for the Chancellor, having made that case, to have to stand up and actually announce parts of Labour's plan. The truth is, this government will not provide the change this country needs. We need a general election as soon as possible.
And just on Labour's plans, as you say, the non-DOM idea was Labour's. Tories kind of stolen your clothes there. But Rachel Reeves, who would like to be Chancellor, is saying, even though that money that they were going to save, that you were going to save from taxing non-DOMs, is now going to be gone, you're still going to stick to the same spending plans and you're still going to stick to the 2p off national insurance. So where are you going to find the money to do all the things you say you're going to do?
They only made the U-turn yesterday, to be fair, but we will be going through that budget
for several days.
They trailed a lot of things that they didn't subsequently do, but we will be going through that budget red book. Rachel Reeves will be going through it line by line by line.
How can you say you're still going to do the same things when you're not going to have the same amount of money?
Hang on. We will be then setting out, and we will make the announcement, we will set out, we will not have any pledges that we can't fund. We believe that, in addition to reform, that our National Health Service does need an immediate injection of cash as well, across the UK with Barnett consequentials here in Wales. We are very determined to still make that injection of cash, and we will look at it line by line by line, and then be very open with the public.
So you're saying you're still going to spend it, but at the moment, you've no idea where you're going to find the money.
Well, we've got no idea. We've just been presented with a budget.
And as a result of that, you've no idea where you'll find the money from. OK, man in the glasses there.
Just to pick up on what Mr Davies said, he didn't know who was going to be worse off. The pensioners will be worse off. The lower end will be worse off. The better off will be those earning above average wages. And indeed, today we're reporting a man earning £70,000 is now able to claim child benefit. So that's your answer, Mr Davies. Everybody is worse off except the cronies of the government.
Well, that's not really fair, sir. Pensioners have had a guaranteed inflation-backed rise every single year. And on top of that, there's been an extra payment that's gone out to pensioners over the last few years. We think that that's very, very important.
The man there in the grey top with just a little bit further forward, yes.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think all political parties are saying the same thing. At the end of the day, all of this comes down to irresponsible government spending. And everybody's saying, oh, you know, like in this budget, we've reduced national insurance by a couple of %, but it's offset by other, you know, buy-to-let landlords are suffering. There's a big housing crisis. And it's all the time, it's the government's irresponsible spending, because then they don't earn the money, and it's us taxpayers that have to pick up the burden each time.
So what would you like to see?
I would like to see somebody that knows about business in politics that spends the money wisely without... They're just whittling money away, billions all the time. There's so many schemes out there, HS2, Rwanda, these wars. It's just been thrown away. Even during COVID, with the PPE, it's been a disgrace.
OK. Let's hear from the woman in the same row, just a little bit further towards the middle. You can reach her. There you go.
I just want to know where the Conservative government are with regards to reclaiming the money that was spent on inadequate PPE equipment, please.
Well, absolutely.
All right. I'll get round the rest. I must get the rest of the panel in. Go on.
Yeah, well, sorry. Well, if anyone has been found, there is a court case going on, so I'm not going to comment on that. But the fact of the matter is, it's been thoroughly investigated. I mean, I could point to vast amounts of money that have been wasted by this Labour government right here in Wales. We had £9 million to go and build a racetrack in the Valleys, for heaven's sake. £9 million.
In fairness, you are being asked about PPE,
yes,
so let's answer that. How much of the money have you got back yet, and how much do you expect to get back?
Fiona, let me just remind everyone, in the midst of that crisis, we had a worldwide shortage of PPE. We were all running out across the world. And the government, I was a minister in that government, we did absolutely everything we could to get our hands on every bit of PPE that was available anywhere in the world. And as it happens, we came close, but we did not run out of PPE. Now, some people took advantage of that, and there is a court case going on, so I'm not going to be specific.
Some places run out of PPE, and they were using bin bags.
There was no running out of PPE. There was no
OK, there are nurses who would differ with you on that.
It came very close.
Well, if they were wearing bin bags, surely they were running out.
Across the world, everyone was trying to get their hands on every bit of PPE there was. And that's why we did what we did. The normal rules, right? OK,
but you're not actually answering the question. In fairness, you're saying, when are you going to get the money back?
If you've got any evidence, and if anyone has any evidence of PPE that was wrongly supplied, they should come forward with it. And where they have done, and they have, that's being investigated, and rightly so.
OK, you briefly want to come back in there.
The government's own minister, Lord Agnew, walked away from the dispatch box in the House of Lords and resigned because he wasn't satisfied the Conservative government was doing enough to try and get the public's money back. We should appoint a COVID corruption commissioner who's actually tasked with going out there and getting the money back.
Right, hang on. No, I'm going to move on. Because the substance of what we're talking about is, will Jeremy Hunt's budget make any real difference to the lives of average British people? This is John's question, who are struggling to make ends meet. Stephanie, will it?
Look, to the comment that was made, we do actually have a Chancellor who was a man of business. He's lost money and made money in business. So I think, look, he's a pre-election Chancellor. Like any pre-election Chancellor, he's weighing up the needs of the economy against the quite desperate, urgent need of his party. I think if you judge it by that yardstick, as an economist, I would say it could have been a lot worse. You have the things he did politically that were important, the tax cuts primarily. He chose the tax cuts that would actually, on balance, be good for the economy, be better for the economy, getting people into work. He also did something important, even though it's true they have veered against rewarding pensioners. He was actually going out of his way to put money in the pockets of working younger families, and that's something that actually in 10 years of austerity under George Osborne did not happen. It tended to be, in fact, it was pensioners who were protected. So I think on those grounds you could defend it, but I do think we have to be clear, the idea that this was an appropriate time for tax cuts on any kind of economic analysis is crazy. And in fact, the Prime Minister has been saying today it was the good economic news we had on the economy that allowed us to afford these. That's just not quite right. If you look at the actual room for manoeuvre that the Chancellor was given when he started to draw up his budget was almost unchanged from the November-autumn statement. And he's only managed to fund these £65 billion in tax cuts from borrowing more and from raising taxes elsewhere and from giving himself even less room for manoeuvre to meet that fiscal rule, even when the debt's going up. So I think that is quite hard to forgive from an economic standpoint, even though, he's done at the margin some of the more sensible things.
Okay,
It's pre-election smoke and mirrors, and I don't think people will fall for it. And if I could sum it up in this way, I think it tells us what we have here. You're paying more and you're getting less back. You're paying more in that I think 7 million people will be either brought into paying tax for the first time or will be moved into higher tax bands because of this your freeze that continues on tax bands. So the tax burden is higher than it's been since 1948. And at the same time, there's going to need to be £20 billion of public spending cuts as a result of these bad decisions. And public spending cuts will lead to pressures on local government, which will lead to higher council tax. Goes round and round. People are paying the price here for a desperate government that are trying to buy votes, and I don't think they will be bought.
OK. From the woman towards the back in the sort of spotty top. Yes.
So I think the reality is that 2% cut will put about £49 in the poorest of society's pockets for the year, and that itself is not enough. That's less than £1 a week improvement in what they've got to live off. And when you take into account that everything else has gone up, that is a disgrace.
Can I just ask, in the interest of balance, is there anyone here who thinks, all things considered, it was a good budget, it was a decent budget? You think? You're sort of saying that and you're shaking your head at the same time, so I'm not sure. Go on, let's hear what you've got to say.
What I'm going to say is that we're going to have to pay taxes. We're going to have to bite the bullet. We've got to give our children the education.
Absolutely.
We've got to give the elderly their care. We've got to give the schools money. It's got to come from somewhere. Nobody's given us the particular answer to this. So we've just got to bite the bullet. and get on with it now, unfortunately. You know, it's just, he's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't.
OK.
And I think that stands for all politicians, not just the Conservatives.
Yeah.
Guto?
I think memories are very short. Only a year or two ago, there was a handout worth 37 billion to help cushion the blow of sky-high fuel bills. That was a very civilised and generous thing to do. But nobody is going to vote this year saying, I'm grateful to the government for actually helping us out when that happened. It's gone, it's forgotten, it's spent. And the tragedy for me is that, as the question implies, is always about what can I have today? What more can you give me? What I would like to see, and that all the dynamics in our politics is wrong on this, I'd like to see a government that's freed from pain relief today to decide what is the cure for tomorrow. And the most encouraging thing in the budget for me were those moves to try and address the potential of harnessing technology, for instance, to grow the economy and improve public services, so that if we are in a situation in 10 years' time, we don't come up against another cost of living crisis. If previous governments had invested in renewable energy, not backed off from that, another previous government had backed off from nuclear, if they'd invested in that, we would not have suffered for the cost of living crisis we had this time round. And so we need a government that does look longer term than just satisfying this craze from voters for help tomorrow, help next week, help with this particular year. If you do that, there's no money to do anything worthwhile that gives us a prospect of a better country for our kids down the line.
Let me ask you this, Nick, and I want to ask you this, David, as well. The Institute of Fiscal Studies made a fairly stark statement today saying that the government and opposition are joining in a conspiracy of silence in not acknowledging the scale of the choices and trade-offs that will face us after the election. They and we could be in for a rude awakening when these choices become unavoidable. So basically what the IFS is accusing both of you doing is pretending you're going to be able to afford things when in actual fact you won't. And everyone here will be paying for it.
Well, no, I've never hidden, and Labour has never hidden, from how difficult the economic inheritance is going to be if we are privileged enough to come into government.
And is that going to mean, are people here going to have to pay higher taxes, expect bigger cuts to public services?
What we will be seeking to do is to grow the economy. We will grow it, first of all, with stability. We will not have the situation we had with Liz Truss, where she was sacking the Permanent Secretary of the Treasury and pushing the OBR to one side. We'll have a fiscal lock to make sure that the OBR has to consider
the best
budget.
Second, growth is going to take years.
No.
And that is why the IFS are talking about a conspiracy of silence, saying that's all very well, but in an immediate term, 2 to 3 years, surely either everyone's here is going to have to pay more taxes or they're going to have bigger cuts to public services. And it's time to be honest about that.
The OBR is making projections based on the plans, the rather inadequate plans.
This is the Institute of Fiscal Studies.
I know, but the OBR at the moment is making their projections based on what the Conservatives are saying. We would then, in addition to that stability, we'd be looking for investment. We want to create a national wealth fund. We want to bring in private sector investment too for the jobs of the future. And we need reform. We need reform
how
things
bad
like
should
our
we
planning
expect it
system.
to... Were you to get into power, how bad should we expect it to be? Should we expect also to be paying the greatest level of tax since 1948 for some time to come?
We want to bring the tax burden down. And you were asking me earlier about funding, and the point I was making is this. We will, for every single spending pledge we make, the public will know at the election exactly where the money is coming from.
No, but hang on. Before, let's not have an example. Let's just put this question to you, because I'm not asking you to criticise Labour. I'm asking you to defend your own record, which is you are also accused of joining in a conspiracy of silence in not acknowledging the scale of the choices. So, for example, the cuts that, should you stay in government, we should expect to public service, to departments where their spending is not ring-fenced, such as NHS, they will be significant cuts that we will have to face.
We've made sure that NHS spending in England is protected. The only place we've seen
what about the other departments?
The only place we've seen cuts to the NHS
prisons,
is in Wales.
Local government,
we put 20,000 extra officers on the street. Can I just point out that Nick is saying that Labour can somehow find a way to cut taxes, but at the same time increase public spending? It does make sense when you look at what their policies are on oil and gas.
OK, what about your policies? I'm asking
to shut down the oil and gas industry.
David, I'm asking about your policies. Your policies. How should the Conservatives win the next election? How big a cut should we expect in the departments of spending, such as local government, which obviously includes large areas of social care. How big should we expect those cuts to be?
You shouldn't expect cuts, because we've already demonstrated over the last difficult few years that we've been able to protect departments from spending cuts. Whereas what's happening in Wales, we're seeing a 65 million cut, and the government which Rhun ap Iorwerth is propping up is looking to cut NHS spending by £65 million a year in Wales. And at the same time, Rhun and Nick's party are looking to spend almost twice that on creating extra Senate members, £140 million on extra Senate members.
We're looking at £20 billion worth of public spending cuts that will need to happen here. And it's very, very important to focus on the fact that what we have, and I find it desperately depressing, that yes, we need change. Goodness me, I want to get rid of this Conservative government. But we have Labour, who presumably will form a government before the end of this year, who aren't offering a different kind of vision, who aren't offering a different way forward. We need to be investing in the future of our children, in growing the economy, in making sure that we have public services that we can be proud of, that don't mean that teachers or doctors or nurses want to leave those professions in great numbers. We need vision, and we're not getting it clearly from the Conservative government. Sadly, we're not getting it from Labour either.
OK, let's hear a little bit more from our audience. Someone here in red.
You've spoken a lot about, like, the tax burden, and I'm speaking on my own experience. I wouldn't mind paying as much tax as I'm paying now if I was getting something out of it. Yeah. Like, you know, the public services that existed when I was younger aren't in place now. I'm 24. I'm talking about 10 years. So I personally wouldn't mind spending as much on tax if there was something to show for it at the end of the day, but there isn't. And I think that's why a lot of people are frustrated.
I think this is the sadness of it. I mean, it's not just, you know, and what the Institute for Fiscal Studies is saying. I mean, we have this massive gap between the public services that we want and aspire to have. It's not unique to the UK, but it seems particularly bad here. We have this gap between what we aspire to have and what we're actually willing to pay for. And you know, the 20 billion that was taken out of the spending plans at the end of last year is not even the half of it, because we've got a growing population, which the numbers yesterday showed means a further reduction in real spending per head in most public services on the basis of these plans, or even the old plans. And no party is really talking about what it would take in terms of, you're asking them, Fiona, but is not talking about what it would take in terms of taxes.
Not getting much of an answer, I don't know if
You're not getting an answer. And it's reasonable, you know, Jeremy Hunt is right to begin a conversation about public sector productivity, because that is going to have to be part of the answer. But this election campaign could have been about thinking through those choices and, you know, where the trade-offs lie, who should bear the burden. And instead it's sort of, you know, cheap giveaways and cheap point scoring.
OK, right. Let's not have any more cheap point scoring. Let's move on to our next question. But before I do, I just want to tell you, we've got 2 more shows before the Easter break. Let me tell you where they are. Next week we are in Liverpool, and the week after that we're in Middlesbrough. So if you'd like to come to either programme, Liverpool or Middlesbrough, you'd like to be in the audience, put your question to the panel, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and we will very much look forward to seeing you. Right, let's take another question from Owen. Owen Rees.
How worried should the Conservatives be about Reform UK and Labour about George Galloway?
How worried should the Conservatives be about Reform UK, and how worried should Labour be about George Galloway, who, of course, just won the by-election in Rochdale? Nick, do you want to kick us off?
Look, I don't tend to worry about other parties. I worry a lot more about my own and making sure we're making a positive case. But I tell you what I do worry about. I do worry about the politics of division, because I think that is a serious issue for our country. And I'm sorry, by the way, that the voters of Rochdale had no endorsed Labour candidate to vote for, and we do bear responsibility for that. I'm quite open about that. But we do have a responsibility as well to have an excellent general election candidate in place for Rochdale, and we'll be doing absolutely everything to win that seat back. And by the way, it'll be won back with a message of bringing communities together, not driving them apart.
So when George Galloway says, you know, he is going to make sure that Keir Starmer doesn't win, he's going for Angela Rayner's seat, how much does that concern you?
Well, it's bizarre, isn't it? Because if that's what his position is, what he's in effect saying is that he wants the Conservative government to continue, which I think is just a bizarre position. We won't be concerning ourselves with, as I say, particular attacks in that way. What we will be doing, Angela Rayner, by the way, absolutely brilliant Deputy Leader and Member of Parliament, will be campaigning in a positive, strong way.
Reform UK, David.
Well, again, like Nick, I don't worry about other political parties.
Well, you must, come on. Reform UK are taking some support from the Conservatives. Are you saying you're not remotely concerned about that?
There are people who are concerned about immigration in this country who are tempted to vote Reform, who are giving out a very simple message. And my message back is, look, I would urge people to think about supporting a moderate centre-right party with a reasonable position, which we have on immigration. We welcome immigration. We welcome the contribution that is made by those who've legally come here from countries across the world. An enormous contribution has been made. At the same time, we think there are rules that need to be followed. It's obviously unacceptable that 50,000 or so people a year are coming illegally into this country. We don't really know who they are, and we are doing something to stop that.
Is talking more about legal migration, which has soared under your government.
Well, it has where people have a contribution to make and are coming in within the rules. I welcome that. I think that's a good thing. Maybe the numbers.
The Prime Minister says it's too high.
It is, and the numbers will be brought down, but they'll be brought down in a legal and a reasoned fashion. And what I would say to people tempted to vote Reform is that they don't really have an answer. They're not going to be able to put a government in place. We can do that. We can address these concerns, but we can do it in a moderate and sensible way. And I regret the fact that there are people coming into. I'm not naming anyone in particular, but there are people out there on social media in particular and trying to get elected who may be expressing views that are quite divisive and unpleasant, and that's something I hope we can avoid in this country.
Do you mean Lee Anderson?
No, I don't mean Lee, actually. No, I don't mean Lee. And I think, you know what, I think we also have to be careful about, I know this isn't you, Fiona, but there's an element on the left who's sometimes quite patronising towards people who they disagree with, and I felt that myself, patronising towards people who haven't
well,
been
I only mentioned it because the Prime Minister said his remarks were unacceptable.
But there is an element of people on the left who I found to be patronising towards people who've got different views to them on Brexit or on immigration or on certain other matters. And I think that they need to realise that they're sometimes creating a problem that they're perhaps seeking to avoid in terms of calming people down rather than having a go at them.
So, Guto, we have Reform UK, we have George Galloway. Obviously, Reform UK have a lot more support than George Galloway. Neither Nick nor David say they're remotely worried about either.
I think they're mirror images of each other, and you could almost say that Nigel Farage, when he grows up, would like to be George Galloway, somebody with extremist views who also manages to get elected, which he has singularly failed to do into the Westminster Parliament. So I have felt for years that the Conservative Party gets hysterical about these fringe groups on the right, and they feel like appeasing them and running off in their direction. And arguably Brexit was the result of an overreaction to the prospect of losing votes to the right. They should have ignored these people and left them at the fringes where they belong. The Labour Party has taken a long time to isolate the lunatics on the left wing of your fringe. The problem at the moment is the Conservative Party, there are good, decent people who are tempted to move in the direction of these people. Just got to isolate them, leave them out, and focus on delivering what people really do want, which is not crazy rhetoric and the promise of simple solutions to complex problems, but an honest debate, true solutions, and a focus on the long term.
OK. Woman at the very back.
Hi. I just wanted to say, regardless of what you think of George Galloway, I think what he offered was an alternative to the Conservative government and the Labour government that were there at the present. And I think people are so disillusioned with both the Tory government and with Labour.
I mean, Labour, obviously, in that case, were not offering anything.
Well, no, they
were.
were.
To withdraw their candidate.
No, they did, yes. But still, the majority, I think, of the people did. He had a huge majority. And next to that was an independent. Then I think it was the Conservative, maybe, or another one, and then Labour.
But certainly George Galloway got a sizable, I think it was 6,000.
He got quite a large majority, yeah. And I think it's him offering an alternative and actually him being quite vocal about something that I think has been really poorly managed by Labour and the Tory government, is the crisis in Gaza, and him actually giving Gaza a voice. I know he didn't just... I saw a little bit about his campaign, and he did obviously run it quite... You know, he did mention Gaza quite a lot, and he obviously did mention what he was going to do for Rochdale. So, it wasn't purely on Gaza. But a lot of it did give people hope that actually somebody in the political classes are listening to general people's voices, how abysmally they think that that's been handled, and they want somebody to be able to go and speak in the Houses of Commons, that actually share the view of the majority of the population who do want a ceasefire and
we all want a ceasefire.
your government hasn't even called for one.
No, we've called for a permanent, sustained ceasefire. We all want a ceasefire. We're all troubled by what goes on out there.
It's not the same thing. With all due respect,
Hamas are not going to stop firing rockets at Israel, and they've been firing them in the last few days.
But you can call for a cease. What you're trying to do there is create like a symmetry between the Israeli military and what Hamas have got. They're completely different levels.
But they've all got to stop, right? That is the definition of a ceasefire. So that means Hamas have got to stop firing.
So call for a ceasefire and ask both parties to stop. But the Conservative government haven't done that, and Labour haven't provided any opposition to that, which meant that your government is allowed to run unchecked.
I hear what you say, and you make your point well. I'm just going to bring some other people in as well, if that's all right. Yes, the woman there in the grey top, I think.
So the budget on Wednesday was reliant on immigration to increase, and yet the Prime Minister has said that immigration is too high. So something doesn't balance with regards to your economic forecast and what your Prime Minister is saying.
OK. This man here in the front. Can we get a microphone? Man here in the check shirt, yeah.
Election year, rabbits in headlights, all of you. You're all rabbits in headlights. The budget was just a short string. Let's see us through the next few months. Let's get some votes in. Labour are offering no viable alternative, especially not in Wales. And Plaid Cymru is so far out. Where do they stand?
Where do you stand, sir? Who are you going to vote for, then?
At the moment, who knows?
Right.
Who knows?
So your job tonight is to impress this man here, and we will see if he has by the end of it. Remind me to come back to you. Stephanie, so how worried should the Conservatives be about Reform UK, and how worried should Labour be about George Galloway?
Look, I think that there's obviously very particular peculiarities to both of those two, but something that's quite common and we see across Europe, obviously, has been people feeling excluded from the debate and the rise of extreme parties or figures at the expense of mainstream centre parties. And that's working its way through political systems everywhere, causing these kind of challenges. But I do think one lesson we've seen from the last 10 or 15 years here and around the world, certainly across Europe, is that the best response that the mainstream parties can make is to actually do better on policy and try and answer the causes of that extremism, that feeling of exclusion. And the worst, the most counterproductive results come from actually trying to emulate those extremists or bring them into the tent. And I think both sides of both mainstream parties have been guilty of that in the UK, and it has not turned out well for anybody.
Rhun?
I'd like to associate myself with the comments made by the lady at the back on Gaza. First of all, Plaid Cymru put forward a motion to the Senedd back in November calling for a ceasefire. It is shocking. There aren't words to describe the loss of tens of thousands of people, mainly women and children. And it is the fault of Westminster parties and their unwillingness to take a firm stand on this that has turned people against them and led to the result in Rochdale. Now, I don't associate myself with George Galloway. His politics of populism and lack of tolerance is not my kind of politics. He was endorsed by the former leader of the BNP, Nick Griffin. That is certainly not the kind of politician that I want to be associated with at all. But it is a failure on behalf of the two main parties at Westminster. And when it comes to reform, I mean, the Conservatives are reaping here what they themselves have sown. They sowed those seeds of division through the Brexit debate, on the lurch to the right, ever further and further to the right. They create this monster that feeds itself. And I fear for where that leads. And there is responsibility then on the parties to bring things back. And the way to bring it back is by offering a genuine vision. The sameness of Labour and Conservative. I'll hold the feet to the fire of whoever is in Downing Street on behalf of the people of Wales. But the sameness of those two parties shows a lack of vision that's turning people off politics.
Rhun, you are working with Labour.
I'm in opposition. I'm leader of an opposition party.
But you have a cooperation agreement on some things.
I went into politics to do things. So, by being in opposition and working positively with government, which I think is a good thing, we have managed to provide free school meals for children in schools in Wales. We have managed to make a difference on free childcare. These are things that are really important. I could go through, as the Conservatives do in the Senedd, just shouting from the sidelines and succeeding in doing precisely nothing. I'd rather not do that, really.
Woman here.
I do have to agree with Rhun, what was said. at the moment, the Conservative Party have lost a lot of trust from the people in the UK. You've destroyed people's chances to get on the property market. You've ruined the pockets of people who have scrimped and saved everything they can, because that money now has to go on inflated mortgages. I'm not surprised about the influx of votes of reform. I currently live in Bristol. I was voting in the election where Damien Egan for Labour won. But I actually went and heard the reform candidate, and he was hitting on every point that everybody wanted to hear. And Richard Tice was making it incredibly clear, you have damaged the UK, and I don't think you can fix the damage you've done.
And
I
what
think
was
it's
he,
time
just
for you to get out.
What was he offering you that made you, that appealed to you?
So there was a lot about education and reducing a lot of the trans debate that's going on at the moment. He was also talking about legal migration, how there should be a one-in, one-out policy. There's over 450,000 legal immigrants coming in and out of the country. He said that we should be replacing those that leave with things that we need: nurses, doctors, dentists, hygienists.
And did he say where they were going to come from?
He didn't say where they were going to come from, no. But he did hit on every point, and he resonated with a lot of voters that were undecided.
Man in the pink and white top.
If both main parties have largely homogenous policies such as net zero and their opinions on the Gaza-Israel conflict, then can it be argued that democracy has failed us?
OK, let's hear just a little bit further forward. I think you asked the question before. Is it John? Was that? Yes.
I think we shouldn't dismiss George Galloway. I think people are disgruntled with all the policies, the main political parties and that, and I think they've lost touch with the public. And I think people are screaming out for change and screaming out for leadership. Okay. And this is a dangerous time, I think, for politics. Yeah, but it's a great time for fringe people and fringe parties and that to come to the surface.
OK. I'm going to move on, take another question. From Bharat Narbad. Oh, there you are.
Since police officer Wayne Couzens' conviction for the murder of Sarah Everard, there have been countless examples of racism, sexism, homophobia and other misbehaviours in the police. What can be done to root out this toxic culture?
Now, Bharat, I had a little look into you since we selected your question, and lots of you wanted to talk about the police tonight. The reason we chose your question is because you were in the police until relatively recently. So what do you think can be done to root out this toxic culture?
Well, certainly in relation to racism, I think you have to acknowledge that there is a problem. We're lucky in South Wales in that our Chief Constable has announced that South Wales Police is institutionally racist, which is the right thing to do. And you've got the Commissioner for the Met, where you've got a lot of the bigger problems, still refusing to admit that institutional racism exists, even though in the 80s we had the Scarman report, in the 90s we had the Macpherson report. Yet, you know, if the people at the top are not willing to admit there's a problem, how are you going to sort that out?
And in terms of sexism, homophobia, treatment of women, what are the... having observed it from the inside, what do you... I mean, it's a hugely complex problem, of course, I appreciate that, but where would you begin to find answers to that?
Well, you know, I think part of the problem is the culture within sort of frontline policing. You know, I was a trainer for a while, training new officers, and we taught diversity and all the right things to police the public, which is our main job. However, then, a few years later, when I went out back on response, those attitudes have changed. You know, because they're going to be mixing with people who've been there perhaps longer. You just need to root out the actual culture within police, and that's going to be difficult, especially when you've got all these examples that we've seen recently, you know, on WhatsApp messages and things. And what are the penalties? You know, management advice a lot of the times. You know, send on a diversity course.
Not enough. Stephanie.
You know, obviously, everything in that inquiry and everything about that case is just, it kind of beggars belief the way that kind of misogyny could be normalised within the system, and there's repeated efforts to try and root that out of the system just seem to have completely failed and have certainly passed by those policemen. But I do wonder, and this was raised a little bit by the BBC film right at the end, actually, this week, in putting this correct focus on Wayne Couzens, how easy it would be for more of him to exist, the likelihood of more of them existing, and the violence that police have perpetrated against women, we kind of forget just the ordinary common or garden assaults, rapes against women that just we almost don't see anymore. We certainly haven't prioritised. And I just think when you think about what we spend our time talking about and what journalists, politicians have talked about when it comes to women over the last few years, you know, we have spent an awful lot of time thinking about hypothetical issues of trans women going into female changing rooms, and almost no time, as far as I can see, actually just trying to work out how to stop this continual violence and assaults against women. You know, I've lived with it all my life, the potential fear of an assault or a rape. Now my daughter is going to have to live with it. And it just seems like there's a lot more focus on sort of cheap scoring of points in the culture wars than on just trying to put that right.
OK. Guto, what can be done to root out this toxic culture in the police?
It's hard to think of a worse abuse of position and trust than what happened to Sarah Everard, and it's sickening and all that. But I'm going to disagree. I think people are racist, people are misogynist, people commit crimes, institutions don't. And there are two problems when you actually want to pin this kind of generalisation on an organisation. Is good people, and nobody loathes a bad cop more than a good cop. You are tarnishing them all with the same brush, and that's not fair on the good people in any organisation. It also gives a get-out-of-jail card, literally, sometimes, for the bad people, because suddenly it's not their moral agency, the technical term, or their choice, their decision to act a certain way. In this case, appallingly, it suddenly becomes a problem of the system, and it's somebody else's fault, and invariably it's somebody at the top, not the guy. One bad man actually committed an appalling crime here, and the good news is that the cops, led by a fantastic woman, I've just watched the BBC documentary, a fantastic woman led the team that nailed that down forensically and put him away. That's a good outcome. And I think that's the outcome we want.
There were lots of failures before then, including the fact that he indecently exposed himself at a McDonald's only days earlier, and nothing was done about it.
Well, that slipped through the net, and that's a problem. But I know that the Commissioner of the Met at the moment is so brutally determined to weed out this kind of behaviour that he's actually rocked the confidence, even of some of the good people in the force, because at the moment, one small slip and people can be tarnished, and some people abuse that. So the good news is that he's rooting it out. It's going to stop. But we also need to sort of express support for the cops and not say, if you join the police force, then you are inherently racist. Or if you join the police force, then you are prone to misogyny. I can't imagine anything less fair and more designed to undermine the morale in a service that we rely heavily on to keep us safe and to cure the problems that we discuss here.
Woman in the red top at the back. Yes.
Hi. Yes, I was just interested to know about this, actually, because I think it's something that's inherent in our society that we need to re-educate young boys from a very early age on sexism and misogyny and attitudes to women right from school age. And I think that does perpetuate into places like the police force.
OK. Man in the glasses in the sort of yellowish top. Yeah.
I was just going to come back to the point about the police in terms of, I think, the man who killed Sarah Everard...
Wayne Couzens.
Yes. He used his warrant card to stop her. And I think it comes back to really only the power that the police have to be able to do that to someone. I experienced a tiny fraction of that power that the police have many years ago, in terms of they were able to stop me for no reason and really challenge me for no reason and be quite abrupt and threaten me with arrest for no reason, and it went through a complaint and all of that. But actually, in that moment, I had no power. The police had all that power. There's not many other people out there that have that. So I think we do have to look at the police again in terms of that power that they do have over us and how they can use that power to do those things, potentially.
Let's bring them in, because I think you said you were a police officer,
I was a police officer in London.
Right, so you were in the Met?
I was in the Met for 37 years. Right. And
so do you recognise this picture that Ailish Angelini, who did this inquiry into... she hasn't yet finished it, but she's done the first part of her inquiry into you know, all the mistakes that were made with Wayne Couzens and the fact that so much was overlooked or just accepted as banter. Do you recognise that? Or was that not the force that you felt you were working in?
First of all, the vast majority of officers don't get involved in this type of issues, right? It used to be called politeness. You know, you weren't impolite to people, you know. It did go on. I joined in the late 70s, all the way through to about 7 years ago. But I think the situation now is it's more transparent. Before I joined, Robert Mark came in and wanted to get rid of corruption and was quite strong about it. Various commissioners have kind of played with it until these recent events, and it does exist. It needs to be rooted out. But as Guto said, the police service shouldn't be tarnished, the whole service shouldn't be tarnished, because the vast majority of individuals would either report it if they see it, definitely wouldn't do it in the first place.
Okay.
And it's
Let me ask you this, because looking, obviously I was looking through the report before the programme tonight, because I had a feeling that you might want to talk about this. I was surprised by the fact that if you are, for example, convicted of domestic abuse or sexual offending, that isn't an automatic bar to becoming a police officer. It will be taken into account, but you could still get the job.
As long as it's declared. Yeah.
As long as it's declared. Do you think that's right?
I think that's slightly changed. I joined,
no, that is the case at the moment.
No, but I joined in 1978, and I think there were kind of...
OK, and I just wonder what you thought.
Stricter kind of conditions.
Well, certainly that's the case at the moment. But let me get round the panel then. Rhun, what can be done to root out this toxic culture?
At the end of the day, it's leadership, and I thank you for the question. And this means so much to you because you've served, and the police means so much to you, and the police needs to mean something to all of us. We police by consent. And we need to maintain that consent, and that means maintaining respect. And I see it in casework in my own constituency recently, where people...
So how does one go about it? That's the thing. Well, because you got the report last week saying that there could be another Wayne Couzens now hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, and when I looked at some statistics that said, I think there was a report in March last year, 1,300 police officers in a 6-month period had been accused of assaults against women, and that only led to 13 losing their jobs. Now, statistically, that doesn't look good. So you need to have that admission, first of all, beyond any doubt that there is a problem within the police. Unless you have that, you cannot move forward. You have to see the processes in place, as the legal system has had to do in strengthening issues relating to convictions on rape, for example. These things take time. But that has to be shown through the leadership of the police, showing that they're serious. And it's not just the police. We've seen cases with fire services in Wales recently. I mean, and it's about winning that respect back. And I fear for what happens when we lose it.
Nick?
Look, I think when we're having this discussion, my first thoughts always go to the family of Sarah Everard. And I think that was a heinous, evil crime that was committed by Wayne Couzens. Now, I really hoped at the time that would be, I was shadowing the Home Affairs brief at the time. I really hoped that it was going to be a reset moment. But reading the Angelini review, it's pretty clear in there that the assessment is that it frankly could happen again.
So what do you think needs to be done?
So I'll come to that just a moment. But can I just say, first of all, that, and we've got 2 police officers here in the audience. You know, I've been out with police officers. I've seen the risk, the personal risk the police officers take every single day. And Wayne Couzens was an absolute disgrace to the uniform, but he horrified the vast majority of the police as much as he did the public.
So what can be done to root it? I'm sure you're both going to say the same thing. That the vast majority of police officers, of course, are doing the right thing and protecting us. Of course, let's take that as a given, because I know you're both going to say that. Let's answer the question.
Yes, what
can be done to root out this toxic culture?
Right. It is about leadership, but what I think specifically needs to be done in terms of legislation is, I think, rather than have all the police forces doing these checks individually, So this is the issue around Wayne Couzens, the flashing with the red flags being picked up. I think
service to service.
Precisely. It needs to be made a mandatory, and secondly, it needs to be done centrally with a common set of standards, no longer by individual forces going forward.
David, do you think, in terms of rooting out this toxic culture, it should be a bar to someone who wants to become a police officer if they have committed a sexual offence or violence against a woman?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because at the moment it isn't.
Well, it absolutely should be. I'm surprised it's not, because I've come across cases
It will be taken into consideration.
Well, I've come across cases, I've dealt with a case where somebody who had served in the armed forces but had done something very silly and very trivial 20 years previously was not allowed to join the police. You know, and yet I find it appalling that somebody who could commit an act of violence against a woman or a sexual offence,
I mean, like indecent exposure, for example.
Absolutely.
Was it the case?
Beyond question. The Sarah Everard case was
Why
horrendous.
don't you ask them to do that, then?
I think that will happen, but you asked me a straightforward question. I've just given you a straightforward answer. I served as a police officer myself, as a special constable for 8 years, as you probably know, with British Transport Police in London.
So do you recognise this kind of behaviour amongst some officers?
OK. I didn't see anything I thought was unacceptable. I saw bad communication at times. I saw that the majority of police officers were trying to do the right thing, not always communicating well, if I'm honest. There were occasions where I saw that, particularly perhaps amongst younger people acting under pressure and under stress. I never saw anything that was remotely, you know, I thought, you know, unacceptable. But I saw that there could be better behaviour at times. And that gentleman up there, for example, he was stopped for no reason. Whenever I had to stop somebody, I apologise. I always begin by saying, I'm sorry about this, sir, but I have to do this, and this is why I have to do it. Somebody said to me, you don't need to apologise, you're a police officer doing your job. I said, no, you do, because you're stopping a member of the public, right? Now, you asked me, what can you do to change it? Because what happened, first of all, was unacceptable. You asked me a straightforward question. Should somebody who's committed violence against women be a police officer? Absolutely, absolutely not. No way, ever. What can you do to change the culture? I wonder what this gentleman thinks. Perhaps we can talk afterwards. I think we should be getting the Black Police Association to encourage more people from ethnic minorities to join the police. We need more women to join the police. And we need more people. We need the police force to reflect our society as it is. That means that all of us in this room are a reflection of society, should be able to recognise people like us as police officers. One thing I think this gentleman will agree with is police officers do not want to fall out with other police officers in a station, because if you press that red button, you want everyone to come running. You don't want half your station to think, I'm not going to help him out because he doesn't like me, because I'm gay or I'm a woman or I'm from a different ethnic group. So let's get the police to reflect the society that we all live in, and then we can really start to change the culture. That's how we'll do it in the long term.
Now, I know there's lots of you want to come back in, including you. Will you forgive me? Because there's this last question. We've only got about 6 minutes, and lots of you asked about this. So I feel duty-bound to try and squeeze it in. So forgive me, because we could obviously keep talking about that subject. Leslie Rees, where are you? There we go.
Keir Starmer previously described the Welsh Government as a blueprint for the UK, with education and the health service in crisis here in Wales. Is that what the UK wants or needs?
Rhun?
I don't think Labour has done a good job of governing Wales. I think our record on health and education and the economy, and I could list other aspects of governing in Wales too, are not what they should be. I would say, wouldn't I, that we need a change of government in Wales. I don't think it's healthy that we've had Labour running Wales for a century, and that's why I and my party are putting forward a vision of a different way that we can take Wales forward, a country that isn't going to be voting for the Conservatives, but we do need a different kind of vision.
I mean, presumably you think that the Labour government here in Wales has done quite well on the things that you have cooperated on them with?
Listen,
or have you had no impact at all?
No, I think I would obviously point to things that we have done, and I wouldn't dare to say that everything that government has done is bad. What we haven't got is the kind of change of pace, the kind of change of direction that would take Wales on a different trajectory. I don't think that having a Labour government in Wales is the best that things can get for Wales. And if we look at challenges in health, we know that we need to see big changes. What I don't like to see is the parties at Westminster then using Wales as a political football, because they're not particularly interested in what's happening in Wales. They're just looking at us. The Conservatives talked about Offa's Dyke being the line between life and death. David Cameron saying that couldn't give a monkey's what was happening with the health service in Wales. He was just trying to use as a political football. We're trying to build a new democracy in Wales currently in the Senedd, but we need a change of government in order to build a better country.
So, Would you agree with Keir Starmer, Nick, that the Welsh Government here is a blueprint for the UK?
Yes, and where I profoundly disagree about the National
It's got
Health
some of the
Service.
worst waiting times for the NHS. Clearly, education is not doing brilliantly.
When was satisfaction with the Welsh NHS at its highest? It was in the early part of 2010, after 13 years of Labour government at Westminster. Why is the NHS struggling all over the UK, not just in Wales? What's the thing that changed in 2010? The Conservatives came into power in Westminster, and that's what the problem is.
But if you look at the median waiting time between referral and treatment here in Wales, and obviously you have a Labour government here in Wales, it was 19 weeks in Wales compared to 14 weeks in England. So
but which region of England are you necessarily talking about? Whenever independent assessments have been made, you need to do the proper comparison would be with a region of England. But the point is this, that whatever your views, I don't want to be having this discussion about which bits of the UK. I want the NHS to be better in every single part of the UK.
What about education then? Because according to the latest, to the PISA report, Wales is doing less well when it comes to maths, reading and science than any other of the home nations. Is that a blueprint for the rest of the UK?
Well, look, I send my children to school here at state schools in my constituency. We have absolutely excellent teachers here in Wales. You can look across different subjects. You can make different points of comparison if you want to.
Well, I'm not. This is just the PISA rankings which the government takes part in.
The Welsh government spending envelope is determined by Westminster, and that's what the problem's been since 2010.
First of all, the Welsh government...
John wasn't going to come to you quite yet, but
okay.
So you're chomping at the bit.
I do give them monkeys, because I've also sent 3 children through the local comprehensive school, and they have less chance of getting GCSEs and A-levels because they went to a state comprehensive in Wales. I care about the NHS, because when I rang an ambulance on 999 for my father-in-law, he had to wait 15 hours for it, and he had to wait for about 6 hours outside the hospital in Nick's constituency, where they've had to build fans to blow away the diesel fumes from ambulances which are waiting 6, 9 or 12 hours.
In fairness, the NHS in England is not doing too well either, as I'm sure you've noticed.
Let's do the comparison. 20,000 people in Wales have been waiting more than 2 years for an operation. In England, with 20 times the population, it is none. None have been waiting more than 2 years. That's the difference.
But the waiting list has grown elsewhere.
We've got the Welsh government bringing in transport policy. I mean, blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. No new roads being built anywhere again. They've just legislated to allow road charging to be levied on the M4.
Okay.
We haven't got the childcare that is going on. Nick, just let me finish.
Okay.
And Nick, how do you defend £140 million for a whole load of extra Senedd members in Cardiff Bay when you can't sort out waiting lists?
OK, I'm really sorry, everybody. I've got a minute and a half left, so you're going to have to be super quick.
All right. I mean, the call to stop all the point scoring is not doing very well so far. Look, you've got to compare like with like. I mean, just as an economist, you look at Wales has got a much more deprived population, much older. I think at the very least you have to start this conversation trying to compare like with like. But we are going to be doing different things. Someone mentioned at the beginning, you know, the United Kingdom is not so united anymore. We've got more devolution, and I think we should be trying to encourage, if we have some experimentation, then people have to recognise that there are going to be differences in different places and try and learn from them rather than just score points.
What have I got, 30 seconds?
You've got 40. Sorry, I'm really sorry.
I was a huge supporter of devolution, still am, mainly because I did not want Wales forever to be like a little kid moaning that nasty Tories in Westminster were not giving it the money to do what it needed to do. We've had devolution for 25 years. Unfortunately, we've ended up a one-party state. One-party states, if they're not corrupt, they're complacent. And there's a complacency in Welsh politics that means tragically on education, on health, on child poverty, which is the personal thing that you care about most. It's gone backwards. Not to mention the lack of any economic growth strategy. And Wales has got to pay its way. And if you dream of independence for Wales Dream, the first step is to generate wealth, not just go find other ways of handing it out. And that's the final note for me, I think, on that. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd.
Where has the time gone? I don't know. I'm so sorry not to bring you in on this because lots of you want to speak, so forgive me for that. Our hour is over. We're over our hour, is what I mean. So thank you very much to the panel. Thank you to all of you for coming along here tonight. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching. From Question Time in Cardiff, bye-bye.
Is there a conspiracy of silence over spending cuts? Stay with us for Newscast next on BBC One.
Once upon a time, in a kingdom far,